To me, being a digital native means that this is my natural environment, and what takes other people years to learn, I can do right off the bat.
You know, our kids can access Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, no problem. When it comes to Microsoft Word or using search engines, things like that, wow, it becomes an issue.
I've gone from always going to the library, looking things up, using just normal calculators, but now I've gone to using the internet, using databases, using calculators with more buttons than I ever would have thought possible.
Well, the benefits of having access to all of the technology we do at Chesapeake are limitless.
So much of what is done today is done with technology. I want to first get to know how some of you have become digital immigrants versus the others have grown up within this digital era.
I was pretty much born on computers. Like I have memories of being in kindergarten, sitting in the basement using Microsoft Paint to make a picture instead of using finger paints to make a picture. All throughout my life, I've had technology infused with it. I mean, my dad was a software engineer, so we always had, you know, new technology in the house. So I learned to do both, you know, the pencil and paper way and the technology using the computers kind of way.
So Ellsworth, how has that changed for you growing up a couple years before Reese? How is that being a digital immigrant now?
Well, I'll tell you that as a teacher, the learning curve is greater for digital immigrants, people that didn't grow up with it. I remember getting the Atari, what was it called, the 2600? And getting hacked in when I was in, what, 6th or 7th grade. One joystick. But the learning curve, so the youth of today are more intuitive with this technology stuff. Teachers, we prepare our lessons and prepare our content, but we also have to prepare to learn these new technologies. So it's more work to get this content delivery across to our students nowadays than it was 10 years ago.
Exactly. And Nick, how do you feel about that?
I mean, teachers have the basic skills that are needed to implement the stuff. The transition comes into when you have to use a wiki, when you have to use databases, when you have to use photo story. We have the material, it's just putting it to work where the tough part comes in.
Exactly. And Jackie, I know you came from one school that didn't have all of this technology being thrown at you, and now you do. I mean, how is these 21st century learning tools really impacting your life?
It's way different here. Reese said when he was in kindergarten, he used a computer, he used Paint. Well, I didn't have a computer in my house until like the beginning of high school. We didn't have computers at our elementary school. That was like a new thing once I was gone. So as I didn't get that, it's harder for me to keep up and to learn things. And some people think, oh, using Microsoft Excel is really easy, but I didn't know how to use Microsoft Excel until this past summer. I didn't know what you do or anything like that. So everyone thinks we're like in the technology like generation, but I wouldn't say that everyone is there because some of us did miss out on that, and not everyone has that yet.
So how do teachers within the classroom adapt to both Reese's generation type students and Jackie's?
Well, it's like you do with students that have different learning needs. You try to give a good overview of a multitude of different teaching styles so you can meet the needs of all kids, because you're not going to be able to focus on 5 kids here, 2 kids here. You have to hit the whole spectrum, and you just have to implement many different strategies.
So what about these technologies? I know you use them a lot within your classroom, Mr. Bergen, and how do you change these students, make them adapt, essentially?
Well, the beauty of this technology, I think, is that you can have 30 students at 30 different stages of a lesson. If you're implementing technology, you can walk around the room and all these students are working on the same lesson, but they can be in 30 different spots because you're allowing them to go on their own and utilizing this technology. And it becomes more of a student-centered learning environment in your classroom, which I think over the past couple generations is what we're shifting to, from the standard stand-in lecture to, letting the students go and find the information for themselves.
Exactly, and I like where everybody's coming with this. Now I want to throw out there, being digital natives and essentially an immigrant, are students becoming better learners or are they better searchers in today's classrooms?
I think what it is it's not that if you have the technology in your hands, you're a better learner. I think it does kind of two things. One of them is it kind of streamlines the process. So before, if there was a word that I didn't know, I'd have to walk across the room, get a dictionary, and then go through alphabetically, and it can take a couple minutes to find the word. And then I have the definition. If there's a word in that definition I don't know, same thing, flip pages, find it.
Exactly.
Now, it's much quicker. You open up Google, Firefox, whatever you type into one bar, you hit enter, and on the very next page you have the definition, you have synonyms, antonyms, everything that's in the dictionary. It takes less time to do it. That's just one example, and you could argue that using a dictionary really isn't that hard, but it carries over into more complex things. So whereas you might have 10 pages in a calculus book describing some higher level topic, a lot of times it'd be easier if you can see a video or an animation describing it. And you can streamline that if you find resources like that on the internet. And there are all sorts of resources available. I think the other big thing that technology does is it raises the engagement.
Exactly.
It's more interesting if you're looking at a flashing picture with cool colors versus a black and white picture in your textbook.
Exactly.
The more excited kids are, the more they're going to remember. And that's kind of our goal.
I think Reese makes a good point in then saying that using a dictionary isn't that hard. But for some, using the dictionary, using a glossary, using a table of contents, some have no idea because they're used to clicking in the side margin and pulled up chapter 15.
Exactly.
It kind of depends, what you've been taught and where you're at in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also helps that a kid who had to take 15 minutes to go and look at the table of contents and to figure out where everything was and to get there, I feel like that kid is going to remember more what he spent so much time, even if it's 2 minutes getting to that definition in the dictionary. He's going to remember that he actually looked it up and he found it instead of, oh, I right-clicked. Exactly. And it flashed up and I wrote it down and I was done. I'm not so sure that kid's going to retain as much information as the kid who actually had to go through, look at the book, ask the librarian where I can find this, do all that. I feel like he's going to remember more.
Exactly, and in these higher institutions now, they're requiring students to go into these libraries. Yes, they have digital libraries, but they're not as in-depth as these actual hard copy books and paper. So, how is this technology changing it to where it's not preparing the students as well for college? What do you think about that?
Well, going back to this better searchers thing, becoming a better searcher can lead to becoming a better learner. The students are going to benefit from having what Reese was talking about, access to this information a lot faster.
Okay.
If someone doesn't understand a concept in one of my classes and they don't understand because of the way I'm teaching it, I can say, all right, fine, go on YouTube and check that concept out if it's a popular concept. And there's myriad number of people who have uploaded their files onto YouTube that will explain supply and demand to you.
Exactly.
So they can learn, become learners, become scholars by becoming better searchers.
Okay. Oh, well, that brings me to my next question about social medias. And you mentioned YouTube within your classroom as a homework assignment to help them better learn. Do you think that these medias should be incorporated within the classroom, within the day-to-day?
I think they have somewhat of a role. As far as being an educational resource, maybe. But to drive instruction or to be the predominant means of a lesson, no. You have Blackboard, you have Wiki, you have plenty of other outlets that are more reputable and education-friendly, if you would, or education-appropriate, rather than some kid blogging using text messages on Twitter. Not really going to improve that kid's reading and writing skills.
Well, then why are these medias so much more popular than Blackboard and the wikis and things like that? Are they essentially easier, or what's the difference between them? Because they do the same thing.
If the social things they're just that, they're social. And I think they have an impact on school, because what happens outside of school has a big impact on what the kid does inside of school. But I don't think that Facebook and Twitter have a place in the classroom, just because you get that kind of information overload where you have so much going on, you have updates from left, right, center, everywhere, and it's very easy to get lost in all of that. Kind of going back to the better searcher thing, I feel like with the more technology, you can actually become less adept at searching, because if I want to find something out, all I do is, all right, I go to Firefox, I click on the top bar and I type in, second derivative test, and there's an explanation on the very next page that comes up. The problem is, the further you get along in education, the less there is available on each topic. So like Algebra 2, everybody takes it, so there's millions of resources. Calculus 1, fewer people take it, there's still a lot of resources. Once you get to higher education and you get into field, like if I'm taking Microbiology 4, there's going to be maybe 2 or 3 articles online. But if I really want that same wealth of information I had online when I was taking Algebra 2, I'm going to have to hit the books. And there is no Google in the library. You have to sift through, you have to know how to distinguish a good source from a bad source, a magazine from a journal article.
Exactly.
You know, this technology isn't anything new. I mean, at one point, books were new technology.
Of course.
And it's something we have to grow into, and it's never going to replace a paper book. Just like books will never replace spoken language. But we need to learn how to make the two play nice and mesh together.
Exactly.
You need skills in both fields.
Exactly, and that brings us to our last question. I mean, how are these students, with all this technology being thrown at them, I know we realize it at this table here, but within the classroom, are students really not being as dependent upon the technology to where they're prepared to, if they go to college, they're going to know they need to look into a book, or are they just completely dependent on technology?
I think even if they are dependent on technology, once they get to college, there's not going to be, until they get to Microbiology 4, they can still use the internet. They can still use the technology. So maybe they don't necessarily have to be as good at the books until they're later on, and then maybe they'll mature and they'll be good enough at it by then that they'll be able to go to the books. Because next year in college, they're not going to be able, like, they're not going to absolutely need that book. They're going to go to Google, they're going to type it in, they're going to find it, and they're going to be done. That's just what they're going to do.
What about teachers within your classroom now? I mean, is it, you said you had to learn and prepare to learn this new technology. How dependent are you on it now?
Well, I'm very dependent now, but that's just, I think that's a product of being where I am at Chesapeake High School. But technology is just the next iteration in learning.
And I think technology makes it more student-focused. I mean, I see myself as an educator who is more of a facilitator. I want the students to run class and me to mediate and allow them to branch off in areas that I didn't think of, because it just makes it more worthwhile in learning. You know, I've learned it, Mr. Bergen's learned it, whereas, you know, Jackie and Reese, they might learn it in a different way and open some more eyes.
Exactly, and I think that's what the technology needs to be doing, and I'm glad we sat down and talked about it. Thank you guys for coming out and sitting down with me. If you have any questions or comments on the show, let us know on our Facebook or Twitter pages at /i.edu show. Until next time, I'm your host, Rachel Martinez. So that was great. Thank you guys so much for coming out.